בוקר טוב.
בוקר טוב.
מה שלומך?
תודה.
את עדיין מלמדת גמרא?
לא, אני לא מלמדת השנה גמרא, לא.
בוקר טוב.
בוקר טוב.
בוקר טוב.
בוקר טוב, שבוע טוב.
בוקר טוב.
בוקר טוב, שבוע טוב. I'd like to dedicate this session to a refuah shlema for one of my daughter-in-law's relatives, but it's supposed to be private, so I'm not saying the name.
Okay.
רפואה שלמה.
רפואה שלמה, and if I
Amen.
can add רפואה שלמה to a dear friend, חדווה רבקה בת עדנה.
Amen.
רפואה שלמה.
Refuah shlema.
Amen.
Ah, dear. Hi, Becky.
Hi. Everybody had a good Chag. 8 o'clock was my minion. I couldn't
We
make
missed
it.
you, Becky.
I missed you guys too. What could I tell you? Had to learn on my own.
We've got a whole week of regular time.
Well, we have Rosh Chodesh Wednesday and Thursday, but all right.
I mean, you don't have to eat a lot of extra food and you don't have to do a lot of extra
Okay.
things.
Right. I have a Chalakah on Wednesday,
Pardon?
but that's
What?
6 o'clock at night.
You have a what?
I have a
Chalakah.
Chalakah on Wednesday evening.
Oh, Mazel Tov. Yeshikoy. Oh, very nice. Okay, I think we should start.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Shkoyach.
so the main discussion, the first part is about using wood. And the basic principle, I think, I'm not sure we've seen it before. You can only use wood for fire and not for other things. Okay, so here we go. One line, Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, second line. You can't support a pot with a piece of wood, and also the door. What bedelet al kadaitach? What do you mean you can't support the pot with a door? Ela ema v'chein hadelet, and also you can't support the door. Say instead, you can't support the door with a piece of wood. Tanu Rabbanan ein somchim et hakadera b'vika'a v'chein hadelet. What we just said. Okay. Lefi shelo nidnu eitzim ela lahasaka. Basic principle. You can only use wood for burning and not for other uses. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon says you can. Ve'ein manhigim et habehema b'makel b'yom tov. Rabbi Eliezer b'Rabbi Shimon matir. And you can't take a stick to like lead an animal on the road on Yom Tov, but Rabbi Shimon says you can. Lema Rabbi Eliezer b'Rabbi Shimon ba'avua svirle delayed le muktzah. Maybe we should say from this idea that we know that Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, is like his father. He says there's no muktzah. In other words, you could use this stick for whatever you want, I think, more or less. No, we can't say that. Lo, baha afilu Rabbi Shimon modeh, but even here, even Rabbi Shimon in this case would agree, mishum de mechse kaman da azel lechinga. Because if you're leading the animal with a stick, it looks like you're taking it to market, and that's a business commercial thing. You're not allowed to do that. And interesting, the word chinga actually means dance. And they use that word because when you walk around the marketplace, you're looking for bargains and you go round and round, it's like a dance. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, now we're talking about a chizra, which is a piece of wood that you use as a spit. Rav Nachman asar v'Rabbi Sheshet shari. So they disagree whether you can use it. Birtiva kule alma lo pligi da asur. No, we say everybody agrees it's asur if it's a wet piece of wood. Ki pligi v'yeveshta man da asar. Everybody agrees that if it's wet, it's asur, but if it's dry, man da asar. One of them prohibits it. Amar lach lo nitnu eitzim ela hasaka. Since it can't burn well because it's wet, so it's forbidden. Uman deshari, and the one who says it's permitted, amar lach, he'll tell you, mali litzlot bo, mali litzlot begachalto. What's the difference if I'm cooking with it as fuel or if I'm using it to hold the piece of meat as a spit? Ikadami, others explain it this way. Veshta kule almalo pligi deshari ki pligi. Okay, everybody agrees if it's dry, you can use it. Where do they disagree? Birativta, they disagree with if it's wet. Manda asar, the one who says it's forbidden, delo chazeh tehasaka. He says you can't burn it, so therefore it's muksa to start with, and you can't use it. Uman deshari, amarlach, and the one who says it's okay, he tells you, ha chazeh dehesek gadol. If you put it in a really big fire, it will burn. V'hilchata, and this is the halacha, yeveshta shari, retivta asur. If it's dry, you can use it. If it's wet, you can't. Okay, now we're going to go on to gathering up pieces of wood. The Rash Rava, Isha lo tikanes l'dir ha'itzim likto mehen ud. A woman cannot go out and collect from like the woodshed an ud, a firebrand. The ud shenishbar asur lahasiko b'yom tov. And if it's a broken firebrand, it's forbidden to use it at all because a broken kli is considered muksa. So if you had a piece of wood that was a kli and it was broken, you could not even use it for firewood. Lamemra, the Rabbi Yehuda Svirale, the eat lay muksa. Should we conclude from this that Rabbi Yehuda does not consider said there is such a thing as muksa, because he says you can use it in any case. V'ha'amar le Rava the Shamaya, but Rava said to his shamash, Tfeili bar avaza, ushtei me'ei l'shunra. I want you to cook for me or roast for me a nice goose, and then throw the innards to the cat. So that would be the innards would be considered muksa. How can he throw it to the cat? And so we would say that that we're discussing here the issue of muksa, but it turns out we're not. There's always a different issue to come up. Hatam kevan de masre me'edmol date al ilave. Now he had in his mind already yesterday that he was going to use these. He designated these innards for the cat, and therefore it doesn't prove that we can say he doesn't believe in muksa. Now we go into another Mishnah. Rebbi Eliezer Omer, Notel Adam kesam shel milfanav lachatzot bo shinav umegabev min chatzer umadli. Rabbi Eliezer says that a person can take like a little toothpick kind of thing, in which he has in front of him in order to clean his teeth, and he can gather from the chatzer different pieces, small pieces of wood, and he can burn them. We consider everything in his chatzer, he really is considered like it's at hand and he can use it. And the Chachamim say, yeah, he can gather only from things in his house and burn those. En motziim et ha'ur lo. Okay, this is interesting. How can you make a fire? I mean, we know that you can. Okay. En motziim. I'm sure that Gemara go into further. Ein motzi'im et ha'ur, lo min ha'etzim, v'lo min ha'avanim, v'lo min ha'afar, v'lo min ha'ra'afim, v'lo min ha'mayim, ve'ein melabnin et ha'refa'im litzlot b'hem. Okay, these are things that you cannot do to get a fire on Yom Tov. You can't take out the fire from, now okay, let me check on this. I don't remember what that's about. You can only gather, you may not produce fire from wood nor from stones. Okay. Dina, I hope you're going to go into this more because I'm not quite sure. Okay. You don't make a fire from.
How are we allowed to use, according to what we've learned, how are we allowed to use a kesam? It's not ochel nefesh. I mean,
well, I guess that's where the disagreement is, that which kind of wood and for which purposes you can use the wood.
I thought it's only for kindling.
He doesn't think
right.
so.
Well, there's obviously a disagreement about that. So
Right. That's the machloka.
I don't know what the halacha is exactly, but there's a disagreement.
Yeah, it's going to come up more in my Amud about. They seem to think it's
Okay.
tikkun kli.
Okay.
Whatever. Well, we'll get there in like a minute.
Okay, great. Okay, so anyway, you can't make a fire from wood, from stones, and not from earth. So what is this from earth? They say that like it was a really hard ground, and you were to like go up and down inside the hard ground, you could make a fire from that. Not from tiles, and I think we'll go into that more later. Lo min hamayim. This is an interesting one. You can't take like a white glass cup, put water in it, and use it as a magnifier that you hold a kindling or something near it so that it will catch on fire. Ve'ein, and I've never tried that. Maybe you want to try that at home. Ve'ein melabnin et ha'refa'im litzlot b'hem, and you can't heat up tiles and then use them for roasting. And that's over to Dina.
Perfect.
Why can we not use rocks if we mechavein beforehand that we're going to use it like for the bathroom? You take two big.
Dina, you're gonna deal with that?
Yeah, meaning the whole issue of this thing isn't about because those things are muktzah, it's saying you can't create fire. This is actually, this mission is where we learn the whole idea that even though on Yom Tov, yes, we can cook and yes, we can use fire, but we can't create fire. We can only enlarge it or transfer it or whatever. That's what they're saying. So that's why even if the rocks were designated beforehand so that they're not muktzah, you still can't create fire. That's what they're saying here. And
So that's like havara. That's like what we believe havara.
Exactly. What's interesting is that on my Amud, they explained it in like literally like one line, even though it's like such a big thing. But like I listened to both Rabbi Rasner and Rabbi Leibowitz, and they like talked about it for a lot. So whatever. Okay. Anyway, so here we go. Here's the Gemara. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda. So exactly, meaning it's going to be talking first also about the question about the toothpicks and whatever. So ochle behema ein bahem mishun tikkun kli. So Rabbi Yehuda says that something which is suitable like to be food for an animal does not have a tikkun kli problem, which from the fact that he's saying that we can tell that the problem with otherwise taking wood and taking off a sliver to make a toothpick is a problem of tikkun kli, and that's why he's saying if it's soft material that would be like, I don't know, hay or a reed or something like that would be edible by an animal, it's not tikkun kli. And on that, there were two different explanations as like why, like just because it's suitable for food as an animal, why does that suddenly make it that if you say take that reed or a hay to make the toothpick, that then suddenly would be okay because it's ochle behema, like what's that heter about? So the Ran explains that if it's so soft that an animal could eat it, then by definition, it's not going to be lasting, right? Like a flimsy reed or something like that. Yeah, you can use it as like floss, but it's not, you can't really call that a kli. It's like so flimsy. So that's how he explains it. It's just about that if it's edible by an animal means it's soft and flimsy, means it's not lasting enough to be a kli. And the Steipler, this was again from recordings I listened to, the Steipler explains that interestingly, that he says that anything that at one point gets the designation of food, whether it's food for humans or food for an animal, can't lose that designation. So that if it was like, say, food for an animal, this hay or reed, that even if you turned it into a toothpick, it still has the designation of food and doesn't get the designation of a kli and whatever. But either way, Rabbi Yehuda's statement is, if it's edible by an animal, you don't have the tikkun kli problem. Okay. But here comes a challenge. So first we get all the things you can do, meaning if you have these like woods, right? We saw this also before about that they would sometimes use wood for right to make like the samim or for the good smell or whatever. So he's saying if you have that wood that has a good smell, you can, move it in order to smell it. And you can like, I don't know, wave it before a sick person. I don't know if that's to like give him, almost like to fan him and give him air or also to help him smell it, whatever it is. But bottom line is you can smell it. You can wave it for the sick person. You can, rub it between your fingers to make the smell come out. So all that's fine. But here's the part that's relevant for us. But you can't cut it in order to be able to smell it. And if you did, meaning cut it, it wouldn't be deoraita, meaning you'd be pater, but it would still be like asur drabanan. And now it even goes further and says, and say in order to take this wood that we said again, you can wave it and you can smell it and you can rub it, but you can't cut off a piece to smell it. And you definitely can, right? If you cut off to smell, it'll be pater aval asur. But if you actually cut off a piece to make a toothpick, it's mamish like chayav deoraita chayav chatat. And sort of what they're assuming here, though that's going to be the ultimate resolution, is that, again, they're raising this as a challenge in Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda's point was if it's edible by an animal, then it's like doesn't have this tikkun kli problem. They seem to be saying, yeah, it's even asur d'oraita. Again, the answer is going to be, we're not talking about something edible by an animal. But either way, that they're raising this challenge.
Is that makeh b'patish?
So even within tikkun kli, meaning what's this problem of tikkun kli? So it's machloket Rashi Tosfos. Rashi thinks a makeh b'patish problem. Tosfos says that it's a boneh problem, that it's sort of like building. The reason why Rashi can't say that it's boneh is because Rashi says in binyan b'kelim. So anyway, so it's a machloket. Like what is tikkun kli anyway, right? That's not one of the 39. So again, it's machloket whether it's makeh b'patish or boneh. Wait, and there was a third shita also. Wait, I wrote it down somewhere. Yes. Interestingly, the Uraim, this is actually, again, this is all from recordings. I can't say that I looked at everything inside. But the Uraim, he agrees with Rashi that ein binyan b'kelim, but he also thinks that it can't be makeh b'patish. Again, Tosfos says it's boneh. Rashi couldn't say boneh because ein binyan b'kelim. Therefore, he says makeh b'patish. But the Uraim says we can't say makeh b'patish either because that's only when you're perfecting an already usable kli, not when you're creating one to begin with. So he actually says mechatech. Anyway, so there ends up being three different shitot about what is anyway this problem with creating this kli of this toothpick. Is it boneh? Is it makeh b'patish or is it mechatech? In any case, but again, so now we have this challenge on Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda says if it's edible by an animal, you don't have this tikkun kli problem. We have this Beitzah, which seems to be saying you're going to be chayav chatat if you create this toothpick. So Amar lei. So first, it even just sort of Rabbi Yehuda says hashta pater aval asur kakashili chayav chatat mibaya. Like yeah, you're right. I'm in hot water. Like had we only had the clause about the pater aval asur, I would already be in trouble. But now that you even have a chayav chatat for making the toothpick, whoa, you're right. Like I'm like you're right. I have I got to answer this.
Dina, we're talking about Shabbat, not Chag, right? There is no.
I'm trying to think. Does it matter whether
there is no sogeg on Chag? There's no sogeg on Chag.
You're right. They're going to talk about that later about like the no shogeg on Chag. So you're right. Yeah, yes. It does seem to be that they're talking about Shabbos. Yeah. So Ella Kitanya Pikashin, but the obvious answer, which I mean, kind of was intuitive from the get-go, is that, but this Beitzah, which says Chayav Chatat, is talking, meaning it's not the Rabbi who just said you can always make a toothpick. He just said something edible by an animal, doesn't have a tikkun kli problem. So the obvious resolution here is what he says, which is Ella Kitanya Pikashin, that we're talking about something very hard, something that's not edible by an animal, and then there's no contradiction. Like he agrees that something hard, not edible by an animal, you can't make it kli. So that's the resolution. But they challenge by saying, wait, if you remember in the list of things that you can do is to like rub it between your fingers and bring out the smell. And they're saying, wait, can something that hard that say it's not edible by an animal, can that then be rolled? And by the way, I wasn't sure if they were saying, would it be mutter to roll it? Or if they're just saying, is it possible something so hard? Can you just even do that too? But either way, they're raising that. And they say, you're right, the Beitzah is sort of missing some words, and this is what it really means. Meaning you can again do the rubbing thing between your fingers to make the fragrance come out, and you can also even cut it in order to be able to make the smell come out stronger. Here's the part that they're inserting in that they're saying was missing. What are we talking about when you say that you can roll it and even clip it in order to make the smell come out? And that's something very soft, which again would be edible by animals, and then we're maintaining Rabbi Yehuda's position that then you don't have a tikkun kli problem. If it's something hard that's not edible by animals, that's when we're saying that you can't clip it to make the smell come out or to make a toothpick or whatever. If you clipped it to make the smell come out, it would be again asur Rabbanan. To even make a toothpick, which has the kli problem, then then don't do it. And if you do, it's even chayav chatat. And by the way, what's going to be important here, we already see, is why should say clipping it in order to make the smell come out be only Rabanan and clipping it to make the toothpick be d'oraita? And the answer is because the clipping it to make the toothpick is already like making a kli, and that again, whether it's makeh bepatish or whether it's boner or whether it's mechatech, is a malacha d'oraita. The clipping it in order to make the smell come out where you're not making a kli really actually ought to be mutter. The only reason why it's usur is it's only usur Rabanan unless you then come to cut it to make a kli. So that's why again, cutting it to make the toothpick, if it's hard and not edible by animals, asur d'oraita, and to make the smell come out would be Rabanan. That's going to be relevant even for coming soon. Okay, so Tani Chad, right now they're going to raise a contradiction between two different Beitzahs. So one Beitzah says that yes, you can like clip, wood and to make the smell come out. Another one says you can't, right? Again, we've sort of seen this where it's not clear. But the obvious reconciliation first suggested is Rav Rav Chisda lo kasha habarakin habekashin. That again, that the one where it says that you can is if it's soft, and right, exactly, if it's soft and edible by an animal, you can, and if it's hard, not. Again, that's what we've seen the whole time. Nobody really seems to be saying you can't ever do it. If it's edible by an animal so that it's soft, then you can, and if it's hard, then you can't. So that's again what we're seeing here, which is what we've seen the whole time. But they say, Rav Acha Bar Yaccov, what's it called? But now we have a challenge by Rav Acha Bar Yaccov, Bikashin amai lo, right? Where he's saying, wait 1 second, like, even if it's hard, why should you not be able to, clip it and what's it called? In order to get, now they're talking about in order to get the smell to come out. So here's why it's relevant what I said before about the isur d'oraita would be the clipping it to make a toothpick, because that has the making a kli, whether it's boner, makeh bepatish, or mechatech. The smell was the gzeira d'Rabanan, unless you come to do it to make the toothpick. So what he's basically saying is, wait, but like, why would it, even if it's hard, why would it be usur to cut it in order to make the smell come out? Right, where we see that a person can break a barrel in order to get whatever the dried figs that are inside of it, as long as he doesn't intend to make a kli. And by the way, this is where also in the recordings there, when we get to the end of it, I'll talk a little bit more about it because it was really interesting. This is where the whole thing comes from about can you or can you not open up packages and doesn't make it clear, does it not, whatever. So when we get to the end of this piece, I'll just mention a little bit of what they said. It was really interesting.
So that's why we open a can from both sides.
Exactly. So, and again, not everybody says you have to do that. When we get there, I'll talk about why some say yes and some say no, but it's based on this, which is like so interesting. But we haven't even gotten to the piece where it gets even more relevant. When we get there, I'll mention it. But in any case, the point being, we have this Mishnah where it says that you are allowed to break the barrel as long as, notice the language is meaning it's irrelevant whether like what actually the way that you break the barrel does or doesn't create a spout or a kli or whatever it is. As long as your kavana is you're just trying to get out those dried figs, it's okay to break the barrel. The reason that it's a challenge for our for our point is that they were basically saying the isur d'oraita would be making a sliver of wood to make a toothpick. They asur Rabbanan doing it even for the fragrance, even though doing it for the fragrance should be fine. They asur Rabbanan unless you then come to do it to make the kli. If it's true that the isur d'oraita is making the kli, but they asur rabbinically sort of doing something that would make the kli, even if your intent wasn't to make the kli, you just wanted the smell, then that should be true of the barrel case also. The isur d'oraita should be breaking it to make a kli, but it should be asur Rabbanan to make it even not to make the kli, even if it's just to get out the dried figs, lest you come to break it to make the kli. And the fact is the Mishnah says it's totally mutter to do it, that as long as you don't have kavanah to make the kli, it's fine to break the barrel. Parallel being then, if all you're doing is cutting off the wood in order for the smell, but not to make the kli, it shouldn't be asur Rabbanan. It should be totally mutter. So that's why they're sort of raising this challenge, which happens to just be an interesting question in general. Like, when do we yes aser things Rabbanan? When do we not? When can kavana make the exact same action be mutter versus not? In any case, but first, there's even first an additional challenge, which is va'od, and they're going to sort of bring now a ma'aseh shahaya type of challenge. Rava bar Rav Ada, Ravin bar Rav Ada, the Amri Trai, so both of these, I guess they're probably brothers, right? Both the sons of Rav Ada, whatever. They're both of them say Yavinan be Rav Yehuda, when they were in the house of Rav Yehuda. Basically, he would break off branches. They're talking about branches, I think, that were already on the ground, but he would sort of basically break off like a branch and sort of give them big sticks in order to smell them. Point being, though, that now we have one challenge, just, hey, based on that other Mishnah, we don't aser this Rabbanan if your kavanah is not to make a kli. And we even have this Masha Shahaya from Rav Yehuda who would do it, meaning even though it in theory could be a kli of like a walking stick or something, but his intent was just to give it to us for the smell, and he did it, and he didn't think it was a problem because of an Isser Drabanan, unless somebody actually make the walking stick or whatever. He thought it was fine. Sorry, exactly. Even though the wood could have been used as like a handle of an axe or of a pick or again of a walking stick, whatever. This point being, even though it could have been a kli, but that wasn't his kavanah, and therefore he thought it was mutter, not just Asher Drabanan. He thought it was mutter, and he did it. So again, so we have two challenges on this of like, is there an Isser Drabanan or not?
Dina, we're talking about hard and not soft, if that's the case, right? Which we're not supposed to be doing.
So it seems that they're talking about the hard. Doing the hard to make a kli is asur drabanan. Again, if it's soft, then it's fine. If it's hard, then to make the kli is asur doraita. They're now seeming to suggest that if you're doing it not to make a kli, but just for the smell, it's asur drabanan. And that's what we're challenging of, is there really a rabbinic gezerah against doing it with something hard, which again, to make a kli with something hard would be doraita. But if it's not to make a kli, on the one hand, we have the case of the walking stick and the case of the barrel, where it seems mutter if it's not to make a kli. But our Beitzah that we had quoted earlier seems to say asur drabanan, even for some other thing, lest you come to make a kli. So which is it? We do make this asur drabanan or we don't. So it says, lo kasha, not a contradiction. Ha Rebbi Eliezer, ha Rabbanan. It's two different shitot, right? One is Rebbi Eliezer. He's the one who is machmir and thinks there was an Isser Rabbanan made lest you come to make a kli, and the rabbis think not. What's it called? Okay, so Titania, right? We're now going to prove that this is that there is such a machloket. Rebbi Eliezer Omer, notel adam kisa mishlovnav lachtzotz bo shinav. Rebbi Eliezer thinks that again, that you can again take a sliver of wood that's right before you in order to use it basically as a toothpick. Lo yitol ela me'evu shel behema. What's it called? They think that you can only take it basically from an animal's trough is sort of this idea about it has to be like edible, by an animal, and as long as it was like suitable to be like edible by an animal, then it would be fine. But they both agree that you can't clip it, right? That if it's a piece of wood, you can't clip it off to make the toothpick. They were before just talking about, can you just take it and use it? The in kitamo, here's the part that's relevant for us. The in kitamo lachtzotz bo shinav liftoch bo hadelet. If you did clip it in order to make a toothpick or to use it as something to prop open the door, bishogeg. Here's where the shogeg meza thing, Becky, that you mentioned. Bishogeg bishabat chayav chatat. This doesn't make yes, exactly, yes, right. Shogeg on Shabbos, right? You'd be chayav chatat, exactly. B'mezid b'yom tov soveg etar b'im divrei Rebbi Eliezer, right? That basically, if you did though clip it off and whatever to make the toothpick, to make the doorstop, whatever it is, that's where Rebbi Eliezer will think, oh, if you did it on purpose on Shabbos, by accident on Shabbos, it'll be chayav chatat, and they all, I saw the notes and the recordings all talked about, why are they talking about shogeg on Shabbos, mazid on Yom Tov, but like not the other two possibilities. There were different answers about that, but I won't go into that now. But either way, the Chachamim think, so again, Rebbi Eliezer thinks that you'd be chayav the chatat for shogeg on Shabbos, and you'd get malchut for mazid on Yom Tov. But Chachamim omrim echad zeh ve'echad zeh eino ela mishum shvut. What's it called? And but the position of the Chachamim is that both, right, the Shabbos case and the Yom Tov case is it will only be asur drabanan. He does not think that any of it is asur doraita, because they think that if it's done by hand, you clipped it off by hand, meaning even clipping it off by hand in order to make the toothpick. The rabbis are saying only at most would it be asur drabanan, because if it's done by hand, it's with a shinoi, and therefore can't potentially at all ever be doraita. The most it will ever be is drabanan. That's the major machloka. Rebbi Eliezer thinks no, you're even playing with the doraita, and the rabbis think no, the worst it could possibly be is drabanan. Okay, and so now we're going to connect that to our machloket. So Rebbi Eliezer dekamar chayav hatam chayav chatat. Rebbi Eliezer, who thinks you're playing with the potential to oraita, right? He thinks you could be chayav chatat if you did it b'shogeg b'Shabbos. Hacha pater aval aser. So therefore, he's going to think that when you're clipping it just to not to make a kli, but just to say get the smell. So that's where he's going to think yes, there'd be an iser drabanan, because if you did it for the toothpick thing, then you're going to be d'oraita. So yes, it would make sense to make a drabanan for the level below that. Rabanan amri hatam pater aval aser. But for the rabbis who think that even in the worst case scenario where you did it to make the kli of the toothpick, even that is only to begin with aser drabanan, because again, at least the notes explain that because it's biyadayim and not with the kli and whatever it is, therefore it's only at most it's with the shinoi and it's at most only drabanan. So then hacha mutter lechatchilas. And when you're doing it for smell, it's of course going to be mutter. Like the worst case scenario of you even doing it for the thing you're not supposed to do of the kli is only drabanan. So we're not going to make again ein gozer and gezerah al gezerah, and that's how they're explaining why really the root of the machloket is whether doing it for the to make the kli of the toothpick is the oraita. Rebbi Eliezer says yes, the Rabbanan say no. Since therefore the next level of machloket is what if you're doing it not to make the kli of the toothpick but just for the smell? So Rebbi Eliezer thinks, oh, we make a gzer drabanan to not do that lest you come to the oraita, and the rabbis think it's mutter because even if you did the worst thing, it's only a drabanan. Yeah, I hope everybody follows. So that's basically how they're explaining this. That's why there's contradictory breitzahs, because there's a machloket tanaim. But then they say, but lately Rebbi Eliezer had it not. Wait, but does Rebbi Eliezer, who again thinks that it's usher to oraita, if you're making the kli, and therefore there's a gezerah drabanan to even do it for something else than the kli. So now they raise the challenge on Rebbi Eliezer. Then what does he not have the Mishnah about that? The Mishnah we quoted before. Again, we had that Mishnah before where it's mutter to break the barrel if your intent is just to get out the dried figs, and as long as your command is not to make a kli. For the chachamim, we now have no problem. Even if you were breaking it to make a kli, they would say it's only drabanan, and therefore it's mutter if you're not making the kli. But for Rebbi Eliezer, we're in trouble here. He thinks breaking it to make a kli is doraita, and there should be an iser drabanan to break it even not to make a kli. So how does he explain that Mishnah, which says it's mutter legamrei? Here's the critical part that's where all the recordings talk about it a lot. Ravashi, Kitanyahi bimustiki. That case with the barrel where it says it's mutter to do as long as you don't have intent to make a clean. It's mutter legamrei, no iser drabanan, is a mustiki. So what's this mustiki? It's basically it's basically a very inferior barrel, which is so like weak and wimpy. Again, the way that they even explain it here is it's repaired with resin. They write basically that but again, all the recording sort of talked about where it's a very inferior, weak barrel, and therefore it wouldn't be a kli. The reason this was so interesting, so now is where I'll just say what they said in the recordings, because it was, I thought, so interesting, is the reason now that this becomes the basis for the whole machloket of can you or can you not open packages and things like that on Shabbos. This is, again, I thought this was amazing. And that's a great example of where it's like, if you learn Gemara, then you can understand that I had never learned the sugya before. Now I see it much more, is that really this okimta, right? The okimta is saying, oh, it's only mutter legamre if it's b'mustiki, some inferior package. If it would be something more, hefty, so to speak, then it would be usher drabanan. But that okimta is only within the sheet of Rebbi Eliezer, right? Meaning we were only raising this challenge of, wait, but what about that Mishnah, which says it's mutter, was only challenged in Rebbi Eliezer. For the chachamim, you don't need the okimta. Of course it's mutter. They think even breaking it with the intent to make a kli, they don't think it's mutter, but it's only drabanan. And so to break it with some other intent, like just to get the dried figs, to get the potato chips, to get the whatever, is mutter legamre, right? And the whole okimta of the bimustiki, it's only mutter if it's some wimpy inferior thing, that was really only within Shitat Rebbi Eliezer, yes, to explain who thinks that otherwise there's a drabanan. But we don't paskin like Rebbi Eliezer, right? We paskin like the chachamim, majority position. And so here's what's so interesting. So Tosos and the Rush say that even though in the pshat of the Gemara, that okimta of bimustiki is only within Shita Rebbi Eliezer, Tosos and the Rush say that everybody agrees to that okimta, which has massive ramifications, because that would mean that even we who don't paskin like Rebbi Eliezer, who paskin like the chachamim, that at worst even to make the kli is drabanan, and therefore if it's not to make a kli, it's just to get the food, should be mutter legamre. Tosos and the Rush say the okimta of mustiki, they say it's l'chol hadeo, even though in the pshat of the Gemara it's not. And that would mean that if it's a flimsy bag, like a potato chip plastic bag, it would be fine. But if it's a can of tuna or something, a metal can, a can of soda might be more problematic. But the Rambam, the Rif, like Rashi, the vast majority of the Rishonim do not agree with that. And it's not the Pshat of the Gemara. In the Pshat of the Gemara, it's clear that the Okimta of Mustaki is just within Shita Rebbi Eliezer, and we don't paskin like him. And that would mean that even if it's a heftier material, it should be mutter if your intent is not to make a kli, which it's not, right? We just want to get the food. We're going to throw it out after. What's fascinating is that the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Russian Tosos, who says the ukimta is with everybody, and it's only okay if it's a very flimsy bag. Rav Ovadia Yosef apparently quotes like a bajillion, again, this is just from the recordings, I didn't read him inside, but quotes a bajillion as is his, Kedarko Bakodesh, all the other Rishonim who all say that that's not the case and it's just within Rebbi Eliezer, and that really it should be mutter, even if it's a more hefty kli. And he says about Rosh Shulchan Aruch, like he even points out that, right, the Shulchan Aruch says this in his intro, that he goes by the 2 out of 3 of Rif, Rambam, Rush. And of those 3, only the Rush is Machmir. The Rif and the Rambam both are Mekil. And Ravaji apparently says about the Shulchan Aruch, I don't understand, like, why is he paskening like the more Machmir Shita? And he even says, had the Shulchan Aruch seen all the Shitot I just quoted, surely he would have said otherwise and whatever. Anyway, but point being that that's where a lot of it gets to, literally based on our daf, in terms of a lot of that machloket about, is it or is it not? So that's why a lot say that it is fine, even if it's a more hefty kli like a can, if your intent is just to throw it out and you're not intending to make a kli or reuse it or anything like that. But again, some are machmir based on, Tosos and the Rush, which is paskin by the Shulchan Aruch, so whatever. Anyway, so that was a bit of a tangent, but I thought it was really cool, like a great example of where, now that I've learned the sugya, I like understand much more of like where that, like I always knew there was machloket, I never really understood it. It's like cool to understand it based on the Gemara. Okay, but continuing on. Okay, so umigabev min hachatzer, the next piece of the Mishnah had talked about, right, that you can, that part of the machloket also is, right, that you can, whether you can gather like hay from like that's in your chatzer, in order to make a fire. If you remember, one of the shitot, the first shitot that Rebbi Eliezer or whatever was more machmir and says you can only gather it if it's in, right, the more lenient shita was in your house or in your chatzer, it's fine, and you can use it either for the toothpick or for fire. And then the other shita, the chachamim were more strict, and they say you can only gather in your house and only for fire. Okay, anyway, so umigabed mina chatzer. So now we have a Beitzah to new Rabbanan, Megabev mina chatzer umadlik, that again, you can gather, the hay or the pieces of wood that are in your chatzer and make a fire. Shekol ma shebachatzer muchanhu, basically, right, that it's all considered, whatever, it's not muksa, anything that's in your courtyard, even if you didn't have in mind, whatever it is, but once it's in your courtyard, it's assumed that you might potentially have in the back of your mind that you might want to use it. But you can't like make piles of it, right? You can't gather into piles. If Rabbi Shimon says that, you can even make it into piles. Right? What's their nukudat hamachlok, whether you can make into the piles or not? Right? So the Tanakama, who thinks you cannot make piles, it said it's sort of like a, almost like a Marid Ayin type of a problem, because it looks like if you're making into piles, it looks like you're also doing it, even though it's, Shabbos or Yom Tov, it looks like you're doing it for also when it's going to be whole. Umar Savar, Rabbi Shimon, who thinks it's fine, he thinks, right? The fact you're holding your pot proves, like everybody can see you're gathering it because you want to make a fire for cooking, like, the fact you're holding your pot, whatever, everybody can tell that, even if you're making to piles, it's really because you want to cook right here, right now, for Yom Tov, right? That's got to be Yom Tov. Okay, then comes the next part, and this, Becky, is what you asked about also before. Ein motzin et ha'or, right? Basically, we're talking about you can't make a fire at all, not from, and they listed all the different things, not from water and not from the tiles and whatever, all the different things. You can't create fire. Interestingly, right, the Gemara says, my time, all right, why not, right? Given that we say that for ochel nefesh, it's fine and you can cook and whatever it is, like, why can't you actually just strike the match and just make the fire? And the answer is, this is what I said. It's like 5 words, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's 5 words. And like, this is where the whole thing comes from, that we don't. Mishum de kamolid biyomto. Basically, that the reason, and again, also it was a great umud for just getting a lot of deeper understanding about things that I've just, again, always known that there's debates about or that you can't do. But anyway, so they're saying it's because of molid. Where again, I'll just throw in, because it was interesting, about like the question of what does that mean? Like, what is molid? So Rashi basically thinks that molid is what's called. He says it's different than right, because there's also nolad and there's molid. So Rashi thinks that they're different, and that nolad is a muktzah issue, and that molid is an iser drabanan, that it looks like you're creating something. Meaning he thinks the two are different. Again, nolad is muktzah, molid is there's like a unique Isser Drabanan against doing something that looks like you're creating something. That's why he talks about it by like crushing ice or whatever to make water, or snow or whatever to make water. It looks like you're creating the water. Now, what's interesting about that is that would mean that this Isser Drabanan of looking like you're creating something would beat out the heter of Ochel Nefesh. And that's why, interestingly, the Stipler asked about that, like, why would this Isser Drabanan of looking like you're creating something not beat out the heter of Ochel Nefesh when like Mamish Isurei Deoraita like are overridden, so to speak, by Ochel Nefesh. And so he explains that because the phrase is Kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu. So if it's like for hana'ah, then you can, but if it looks like you're creating something that looks like melechet avodah, so then somehow it doesn't get like matired or whatever. But again, it's interesting. But bottom line is, again, that Rashi thinks it's not the same as Nola. Nola is Muksa. Molid is an Isser Drabanan looking like you're creating something. The Ravid says, no, they're one and the same. He basically thinks that Nola and Molid are the same, and it's a Muksa problem. The Rambam basically just talks about that because it could have been done before Yom Tov, which is what we therefore have to do. But it doesn't seem to fit the word of Molid, but either way. But again, it was just this one line explaining this whole thing that we don't do, right? You have this heter vochel nefesh here. We can't create a fire because of Molid, but like what exactly is Molid? So again, the three different shitot. Is it is it muksa? That's what the Ravid says, or is it this Isser Drabanan of creating something, or the Rambam just says because you could have done it before? Okay. Anyway, last piece. That you can't heat tiles. Again, they basically said you can't create, right? You can't create fire in any way, and you can't heat these tiles. Micah of it, why not? What's wrong with heating the tiles? What have you done wrong? Amar Rabbi Barbarchana. Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking about new tiles. So basically, his answer is you have to check them, meaning that apparently the very first time that you're heating the tiles, you have to check if they can withstand the heat and retain the heat rather than cracking. And if this is the first time you haven't ever done it, could be a crack. And then here it is, you did this work of, heating it, and which would be usher if it's not for the heter ochel nefesh, but if it breaks, then you've done it for nothing without a heter. So that's the problem. Is, in other words, you really could heat the tiles unless they're new tiles. Again, he made no kimt, it's just these new tiles that weren't checked. The Amrila, but the second opinion is that basically you have to that you have to harden them, and that it's sort of also like a tikkun kli type of an issue, that heating it for the first time is like a tikkun kli thing. But both of them agree to this okimta, that it's only when they're new tiles, either because it could be the little crack or it could be because of sort of this tikkun kli problem. But
So that would be makab patish, no, because you've done the final step to make it useful.
You're right. That's actually interesting. I wonder if they call, because if you remember, Rashi thinks the two are the same. He thinks tikkun kli is makeb patish, but again, Tosfos thinks it's bone and whatever, or could be other. Anyway, so yeah, that's interesting. Is it tikkun kli or is it whatever for those who think it's not the same? But anyway, but that's basically it. That's as far as I went. Okay. Anyway, again,
Wow,
interesting for learning a lot of the basics of practical halachot that we do.
Very nice. Yesha Koyach. Thank you.
Thanks. Sure. Thank
Very,
you.
very much.
Thank you to Rabbi Rosner and Rabbi Leibowitz, whose recordings I listened to. They were great. Okay. Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good
everybody.
day.
Yes,
Lord Tov.